Hi and welcome to today's Gentle Flow. Grab yourselves a couple of cushions and a block, and if your knees get a bit sensitive or if you're on a hard floor, possibly a folded up towel or a blanket as well. So we're going to come starting today in a seated pose, so cross-legged if that's comfortable. You can be kneeling if you prefer, and do use your cushions if you want to support the knees, or to sit on whatever feels good. I mean, you've got them handy, so make sure your body feels comfortable. We'll spend a few minutes here at the beginning of class. And then once you've found yourself into a position that feels okay, maybe allowing the eyes to close if that feels comfortable. And you can bring hands into a kind of bowl shape, palms up one inside the other. Or if you prefer to have them on the knees, palms facing up, you can give that a go as well. So finding yourself into a place that feels good. Noticing what it feels like to be sitting down, be grounded on the mat. Notice what your sit bones feel like, maybe the feet. All of those places that have contact with the mat at the moment. How is your body feeling in this position? Are you able to kind of relax and open the knees a little bit more? Maybe there's a bit of space for the shoulders to kind of let go. Maybe you decide to kind of raise them up a little bit, and then as you exhale, a little shake, letting them come down to somewhere a bit lower, a bit more open. And perhaps very, very slightly tucking the chin to bring length into the back of your neck. And getting a feeling of space between the crown of the head and the tailbone. So not kind of forcing the back to be super straight, but just allowing a little bit more space to maybe creep in. And maybe as you do this, you notice that the front of the body opens up a little bit more. Maybe there's a little bit more space for the breath to enter your body. Perhaps you feel your chest expanding across the mid to lower ribs. Noticing how they expand to the sides and backwards, as well as maybe moving forwards or moving upwards. Being curious about the shapes your body makes, the different parts of the body that are involved in each breath. All of this happens without us even knowing we're doing it for the majority of the day. The body working to draw air into the body to nourish all of the organs, all of the muscles, all of the soft tissues. And at the same time, eliminating anything that the body doesn't need as we exhale. And this breath is so connected to how we are feeling mentally as well. When we're stressed, the breath tends to be shorter, shallower. And it makes it harder for that nourishing air to come in and access all of the places that it needs to access in the body. So while you're exploring this breath, perhaps you also explore what you've been feeling like mentally. Perhaps as you inhale, there is a sense of something new coming in. And as you exhale, maybe the old leaving the body and the mind. using your breath to kind of cleanse the body, getting it ready for practice. Maybe allowing the breath access to places that it maybe hasn't had access to in the rest of the day. With every exhale, almost as if one stress, one worry, one busy thing to do is being wiped off an invisible list. Taking a couple more of these deep cleansing breaths here, however feels good for you, in through the nose, out through the mouth, or in through the nose and out through the nose. And then opening your eyes when you're ready. Turning the palms to face down on the knees. Starting with some nice little twists for the body. So drawing up tall through the spine as you inhale, seeing if you can get a feeling of just slightly tucking the lower ribs so that you're not arching through the lower back. And then as you exhale, bringing the left hand to the right knee, bringing the right hand behind the body, and then opening through the waist, keeping the hips grounded on the floor, coming into your twist. So perhaps you gaze over to the right hand side, or maybe as you exhale, you notice you can come a bit deeper in the twist. Maybe you begin to look over the right shoulder. So turning with the body rather than just with the neck. And no forcing, seeing if you can come to the place that your body kind of naturally wants to be in. On your next inhale, slowly finding your way back to center, hand on each knee. And then exhaling to the other side. So right hand, left knee, left hand behind the body. And then exhaling, moving through the waist and seeing where your body wants to be in this twist on this side. So these kind of twists are great if you tend to get quite stiff in your lower back, in neck, shoulders. They're really good for maintaining function of the body. And really good for the health of the spine as well. On your next inhale, finding your way back to center. And we'll take a few circles through the wrists. So getting into all of those places that can sometimes start to feel a bit tired in yoga practice. And as always today, if you ever want to come down off the wrists, if you want to come onto fists, onto forearms, if you just want to take a rest in child's pose, these are all options that are completely available. Please feel free to take them. So maybe you want to change the direction of your circles. Maybe you get a nice little bit of cracking as you kind of open up, moving all of the synovial fluid. And then if you want to, you can also take a little shake through the wrists. So we've talked about before how this kind of gets the synovial fluid moving really, really well. So if you know the wrists can get a little bit tight, this is a great way to kind of loosen them up and look after them. Okay, bringing the hands back down to the knees. Inhale, lifting up tall through the spine, that slight tucking of the lower ribs. Imagining that someone's got that string pulling out the crown of your head. Finding a little bit of length in this position. And then exhaling out through the mouth to release. Leaning back onto the hands and bringing the knees together. We're going to come into Baddha Konasana. So that's the one where we put the soles of the feet together. So bringing the soles of your feet together and allowing the knees to open up. And your feet can be as close or as far away from the body here as you want, so don't feel like they have to be super close. They can be much further away if that feels better. And if you'd like to, you can fill those little gaps, as we often do with the cushions. If you notice that you tend to get discomfort in the hips, the pelvis, or if your knees tend to be gripping a little bit, to kind of keep them upright. And of course, pop as many cushions under there as you need. Your knees might be much higher up, and that's completely okay. So you can either kind of bend your one cushion, or you can create a nice little stack of cushions, up to you. And then grabbing hold of the feet with the hands, seeing if you can still find that length in the spine that we were just practicing. And maybe you choose to stay here. If this is feeling really, really comfortable today, then you're welcome to take a forward fold if you prefer, in this position. So if you want to fold forwards, then you're beginning to lean forwards with the chest, seeing if you can keep that length in the spine, and then coming to that point where you begin to feel a little stretch coming forward. So it might be that you only move forward a tiny little bit, or if you're feeling very open today, it might be that you come down further. Of course, you're welcome to stay sitting upright here, and maybe you allow the eyes to close. Sometimes that can help if we're trying to let go of something. So if you notice there's still that feeling of the legs gripping, of holding on, maybe closing the eyes and seeing if you can send your breath to those areas. So maybe as you exhale, imagining the knees being able to kind of let go and release a little bit. And how does that feel in the hips when you do that? So taking a couple more breaths here wherever you are, whether you're seated up tall or whether you've taken your forward fold. And then if you've closed the eyes, allowing them to open, one hand underneath each knee, bringing the knees together, moving any cushions out of the way, hands come behind your body, and then that little windscreen wiper of the legs just to kind of release everything off. And finding your way back to center, keeping the feet on the ground. And then a hand comes to each shin. So you can kind of use the hands to pull against the shins. That will help the upper body come forward and sit tall. And from here we'll take a couple of sort of cat-cows in this position. So same idea of how you would do a cat-cow if you're on all fours, but doing it in the seated position instead. So as you inhale, getting a sense of drawing the chest forward, and maybe the chest kind of lifts and opens, maybe the gaze also lifts. And then as you exhale, you can use the hands to help you lean back as you tuck the tailbone round the spine and tuck the chin. So inhaling to bring the chest forward. Using your hands to help support you here, broadening, opening through the chest. Seeing if you can draw the shoulder blades together at the back. And then exhale, coming the other way. So rounding through the spine, tucking the chin, and the shoulder blades move away from one another. Inhaling, coming through once more. So really opening up, finding broadness through the chest, through the shoulders. And exhale, rounding the spine, folding back. Inhaling back to center. Taking the feet a little wider apart, and then coming into a forward fold from here. So again, you can use your hands to walk down the legs, and it might be that you just come forward a little tiny bit. It might be that there's space for the arms to come inside of the legs, and then maybe come down from there. So coming down however far feels good for you. It doesn't have to be a big forward fold. You might want to have a little shuffle so that you can get into the place that feels comfortable.
And using your breath here to center any areas that might feel tight. So maybe you can feel tightness in the back of the legs or in the hip, maybe in your lower back. It depends sort of what's going on in your body where you might feel this one. And a couple more breaths here. So coming down to wherever feels comfortable. And then as you inhale, using the hands to walk yourself back up into seated. You can bring the hands behind the body, take another windscreen just one side to side, and then finding your way to all fours. So once you get there, hands underneath your shoulders, knees underneath the hips. And then we're going to go straight back into plank from here. So if you know that you don't like to go into a full plank, then you can stay with the knees down. You might just want to move the knees back a little bit. Otherwise, if you're comfortable going into full plank, then lifting up the left knee and then the right, and taking one breath in full plank. So pushing away with the heels, reaching out through the crown of the head, the gaze is down in between the hands, and then from here lowering down. So if you want to, you can lower down from full plank, keeping the body in a straight line. Otherwise, lowering the knees down, untucking the toes, and then bending the elbows towards the back of your mat, coming all the way down. So I'm going to take a modified version coming down part way. Once you get all the way down, pressing through the hands and lifting up the chest into your cobra, and then finding a way back onto all fours, tucking the toes underneath, pressing through hands and feet, lifting the hips up and back, downward facing dog. Once you find your way into down dog, taking your feet to the outside edges of the mat, so we'll come into a really, really wide downward facing dog. And then feel free to have a little play here, pedaling the feet if that feels good. So perhaps you inhale coming up onto both toes, and then you can exhale bringing one heel down, inhaling up onto the toes, and exhaling the other heel down. You can also stay knees bent here, or you can move around in any way that feels good. Feel free to bring the knees down if at any point that feels good for you. And then we're bringing the feet back to hips width apart. One more breath in downward facing dog. And slowly beginning to walk the feet forward to meet the hands at the top of the mat. Once you get there, drawing your hands either to your shins or your thighs, coming into halfway lift. So the spine comes long in halfway lift, the gaze is down. Exhaling, releasing forward fold. Rounding through the spine, head is heavy. You can have the knees bent here if you want, or you can let just the hands have a dangle, whatever feels good. On your next inhale, really slow, roll up to stand, rolling up through the spine, and then maybe the arms come out to the side and reach up overhead, palms come together, and hands down in front of the chest. As you exhale, back down into forward fold. So seeing if you can take the hinge from the hips here. Hands come naturally to where they fall. Inhaling, rising up to halfway lift, drawing your spine long wherever you are, gaze straight down to the mat. Exhaling, forward fold. Bending through the knees so that the hands can firmly plant on the ground. And then stepping the left foot back, lowering down the knee and untucking the toes, low lunge. So taking a moment here, still leaning forwards, sinking through the hips, really opening up. And you can stay here if you want, or if you'd like to on your next inhale, you can rise up, pressing through that front foot and the top of the back foot with your arms lifted. As you exhale, hands come down by the foot, and then picking up, tucking the back toe, picking up the back knee, coming straight from here into downward facing dog. So of course you can always come through all fours first if that's more comfortable, so you can absolutely bring that right knee back and then come up into downward facing dog. Or if you want to, you can lift up the back knee and see if you can come straight back into down dog. Either staying in down dog with both feet down, or if you'd like to on your next inhale, lifting up the right foot. It can be a small amount or a little higher. An option to bend the knee, open the hip, maybe the gaze comes under the right arm. So see if you can still ground down equally through both shoulders. And then back to center, straightening that right leg, bringing it back down to the ground. And walking the feet up to meet the hands at the top of your mat. Finding a way into halfway lift when you get there. Drawing long through the spine, gaze down. Exhaling, forward fold. Inhaling, rolling up to stand. When you get there, maybe the arms come out to the side, reaching up overhead. And hands to center. Coming straight back down through the forward fold on your next exhale. Inhaling, finding halfway lift. Exhaling to forward fold. Hands by the feet, bending through the knees. And this time stepping the left foot back. Oh, no, sorry. Stepping the right foot back. Sorry if you step the left foot back, you're going to need to do a little swap there. We've already done that one. And lowering down the back knee, untucking the toes. So left foot is forward. And allowing a moment with the hands forward to really sink into the hips. So you can stay here if you like, if that's feeling really good in that position. Or if you prefer, then you can rise up into your low lunge with your hands lifted. Reaching up tall with the fingertips, still getting a sense of that tucking in through the lower ribs and lengthening through the back of the body. Exhaling, hands by the feet, and from here coming into downward facing dog. So again, either through all fours first of all, or tucking the toes under, lifting the knee, and then bringing the left foot back. Option here to lift the left leg from the ground, whatever amount feels good for you. And to open up that left knee if that's what you want today, to open up the hip. And you can gaze underneath the left arm if that's feeling stable and comfortable. Inhaling, leg back to center, lowering it down to the ground. And then walking the feet up to meet your hands in halfway lift. Releasing forward fold on your exhale. Inhaling, see as you rise up to stand, reaching out to the sides, up overhead, and hands coming to prayer. Taking the feet to a little wider than hips width, toes out, heels are in, and then lowering down into your squat. So if you know that you like to have hands down to the ground when you do this, then feel free to bring the hands down. Otherwise, lowering down. I'm not going to suggest putting a block behind for today. So if you normally use the block and it doesn't feel comfortable to have the heels down, then either come up onto the toes or bring the hands down in front. We're not going to stay here for long. So one more breath in your squat. Drawing the chest forward. And then hands come down to the ground, pressing through the hands. Just straighten the legs, lift the hips. And bringing the feet back to parallel, hips width apart. And we'll take a little ragdoll forward fold. So hands inside of the elbows, relaxing the whole of the upper body. And maybe you take a little sway here, side to side. Releasing the hands back down to the ground. Inhaling, hands draw to shins, halfway lift. Exhaling, forward fold. As you inhale, taking that rise up to stand, rolling through the spine, one vertebrae at a time. Arms come out to the side, reaching up overhead. And exhaling, hands in front of the chest, palms together. Coming straight back down, exhale through the forward fold. Inhaling, halfway lift. So getting a feeling of the rhythm of the breath and the movement of the body. Exhaling, forward fold. Bending the knees, hands by the feet. And from here, stepping back into plank. So again, you can come straight down onto the knees, or you can be in full plank if that feels comfortable. Lowering down either from full plank, keeping the body completely straight, or bringing the knees down, untucking the toes and lowering down from here, elbows to the back of the room. Once you get to the ground, inhaling, upward dog or cobra, and exhaling, tucking the toes underneath, downward facing dog. Really grounding down with your hands and your feet in this down dog, checking that the hands are still flat to the ground and also checking in that the head is still relaxed. On your next inhale, rising up onto the tiptoes and then bringing the right foot forward in between the hands. So you can take a couple of steps to get there or even a hand to help you get there. That's completely okay. Lowering down the back foot, so bringing the back foot completely flat to the ground. Rising up, warrior one. So in warrior one, hips are facing forward and arms come up forward. If that doesn't feel good on the hips, feel free to lift the back heel, coming into high lunge instead. So checking that your feet are hips width apart here, that'll help with the hips to feel comfortable. Taking that little tuck in the lower ribs, helping you to find length through the lower back as well as opening through the chest. And bending into that front knee. Lowering the hands down onto the waist. Taking a step in about halfway with your back foot. And then straightening the front leg. So now you've got both feet grounded a little closer together, both legs straight. And from here, beginning to fold forward, keeping the back long. So instead of folding with the chin or the forehead, folding with the chest. And maybe you come down just part way. Maybe you come down so that you're parallel with the floor. You can keep the hands to the waist, or if you feel that you've got a little bit more space, you can grab hold of either wrist or elbows. So whatever you feel gives you the support you need. If you're holding on, if you're staying on the waist, then keeping the elbows out to the side, that will help keep the chest open. So this pose is about opening up the back of the legs, but also keeping the chest open as well. If you're super open through the legs and you want to come down further, of course you can. And seeing if you can keep that right hip kind of moving backwards. Sometimes it likes to creep forward a little bit. So seeing if you can keep the hips reaching towards the front of the mat. And then allowing the gaze to come straight down to the mat. Inhaling, rising back up. And then taking a little bend through the front knee to help you bring the hands down to the ground. Scooting that back foot back a little bit further, lifting the heel and lowering the knee into low lunge. So untucking the toes when you get there. If you're on a hard floor or your knees are sensitive, this is the time to grab a blanket, just because we'll be here for not too long, but just maybe enough time that the knee might start to feel a little sore. So as with before, taking that little lean forward here, opening up the front of the left hip. And then bringing the right hand inside of the right foot, scooting that right foot to the edge of the mat so that the right hand can be under the right shoulder and you've got a lot of space. And then from here, seeing about opening up that hip a little bit more. So it might be that you stay up on your hands if that feels good. If you're feeling very open here, if the front of your hips are super open, you might find you want to come down onto elbows, or you might want to come down part way, so sort of using cushions to create a part way. It's easy to overstretch it. So I would say that unless you're feeling super comfortable in your lizard pose, and you feel like you've got a lot of space, then otherwise stay where you are. So if you can feel that opening in the front of the hip, then you're in a good place already. Taking one more breath here in your lizard pose. And then leaning back slightly just to take the pressure off the left hip. And you can kind of lift the right hand, scoot that right foot back in so that you're in center. Tucking the back toes under. And then option here to lift up into a high lunge. So this may feel available, it may not. If you're feeling a little bit off balance, then you might want to come just straight back into downward facing dog from your low lunge. If you've got the balance, pressing through the toes of the back foot, the heel of the front foot, and then taking that rise up into your low lunge. Into your high lunge, sorry. And then exhaling, hands by the feet and meeting in downward facing dog. So coming through that on the other side, on your inhale, rising up onto toes, creating a little bit of space to step forward with the left foot and grounding down the back foot onto the ground. So taking a little step to ground down the back foot. As you inhale, bend through that front knee, rising up, warrior one. Feel free to take the high lunge instead if you prefer. Taking a moment to check in, lower ribs, opening up through the chest, reaching toward the fingertips and then sinking down through the hips. Hands come to your waist. Stepping about halfway up with your back foot, straightening up the front leg, checking that the feet are hip width apart so you've got a bit of space. And then exhaling, leading with the chest, coming into your pyramid pose. Option as before to hold on behind the back, interlacing with the wrists or hands inside elbows. Seeing if you can find broadness and openness through the chest. And then allowing the gaze to come down to the mat, getting a feeling of reaching forward with the crown of the head. And that left hip stays moving towards the back of the mat, opening up through the back of the left leg, opening up through the shoulders. Couple more breaths here. Inhaling to rise back up, pressing through the feet to help you come up. Releasing the hands. Little bend in the front knee, bringing the hands down to the ground, scooting that back foot back, lifting the heel, and then lowering the knee down. Feel free to pop a blanket underneath the knee, untucking the toes. So having a little open through that right hip flexor. And then preparing for your lizard pose. So bringing the left hand inside of the left foot scoots over to the very edge of the mat, keeping it parallel. And then you can bring that hand back down underneath the left shoulder and starting to allow the body to move forward a little bit and the hips to sink. Again, if you want to come down lower here, you can. So if you want to come down onto elbows, then you're more than welcome. If this feels too intense, you can obviously use your block or your cushions to also come up a little higher, and you can come up onto fists if you want a little bit of height as well. If at any point this feels like too much, then just move the hips back for a moment and maybe take some little pulses instead. So really feeling into what your body needs. Part of sort of developing yoga practice is being able to listen into what your body needs, learning about how to respond to it rather than forcing it through something that's not comfortable. So feel free to play around here and explore what's best for you. Moving the hips back slightly, lifting the left hand from the ground, scooting that left foot back in to its low lunge position. Left hand comes back down. And then as before, you can either stay here for a second longer or move straight into downward facing dog. Or if you'd like to come up into that high lunge, then you're tucking the back toes under, lifting the back knee, grounding down through the feet. So really concentrating on the heel at the front, finding somewhere to focus on, and then rising up into your low lunge. So it's almost like the toes and the back toes and the front heel are kind of moving down and away from each other. Exhaling, hands by the feet, stepping into downward facing dog. And a couple more breaths in downward dog to finish the standing poses for today. Bringing your knees down at any time. On your next inhale, taking a roll forward into plank, knees come down, and then bringing the big toes together, knees apart, into child's pose for a couple of breaths. Allowing the back and the sides of your body to fill with your breath. Taking a little bit of a rest here. On your next inhale, pressing through the hands, rising up into all fours. Making sure your props, your cushions, your block, blanket are handy to the side of your mat. And then moving into pigeon pose. So bringing the right knee up behind the right wrist, allowing the right foot to kind of swivel into the center, and then walking the left leg back, making sure, taking a little glance behind you, making sure that leg's still parallel with the mat. And it's a good idea to grab your block and pop it underneath the right hip. That will just stop the right hip collapsing over or keep everything a little bit more aligned. Bringing the hands one handprint forward. And it might be that already this is feeling like a big opening in the right hip. If that's the case, then stay right here. If you do want to come down a little bit further, you can grab your cushions and pop them underneath the chest. You can have a cushion underneath the head, a blanket underneath the head. Do make this as cozy as possible. And then you can begin to really slowly lower down. Maybe you come onto elbows and forearms. And perhaps closing the eyes so that you can really feel into what your body's needing today. If you want to, you can begin to bring the forehead down to the mat.
so that you can really release and relax in this pose. So this can be quite an intense pose. If this is feeling very intense already, using your breath, do come back out a little bit if it's too much at any point. And getting a feeling of a really subtle sensation of the right hip just ever so slightly drawing back as the left hip ever so slightly draws forward. Stay in here for a few more breaths in this pose. Seeing if you can find a bit of stillness here. It can be really tempting to want to fidget. Seeing if you can find a place where your body can be still for a couple more breaths. And using your inhales and your exhales to breathe through any tightness, any discomfort in the hips. If your knee is feeling uncomfortable at any point, then please do come out of this and come straight back into all fours and into child's pose for a bit. On your next inhale, if the hands are forward, walking the hands back up, removing any props out of the way. And then tucking the left toes under so that you can kind of walk that left leg back in. And then bring the right knee back. And from here, you might want to either take some hip circles, or it may feel good to open up the back of the legs. So if you want to open up the back of the legs, then just moving into downward facing dog for one breath. And lowering the knees down. So going with whatever you need in that sort of in-between bit to loosen off before we come on to the other side. When you're ready, you'll join the left knee up behind the left wrist, allowing the foot to swivel to center, walking the right foot back, checking that it's parallel, and then block comes underneath the left hip this time, and finding your cushions. So your little bit of support can be one cushion, both cushions, walking the hands forward, a handprint. Maybe you want to stay here. And otherwise finding a way down onto forearms, elbows, or all the way down to the ground if you wish. So it might feel completely different on this side. You might have, this hip might be more tight, it might be more open. And feel free to kind of move the foot around if you want the foot to, be over to the side a little bit more, to come up a little bit more, make sure that the foot's not digging in anywhere that feels horrible and uncomfortable. And again, any pain on the knees, then either kind of come out slightly, walking the hands back up, or come out completely into your all fours and rest in child's pose for a little bit. Otherwise, this time it's the kind of left hip that draws back a little bit and the right hip that draws forward a little bit. So this is a really subtle movement. It's not so much that the hips move, it's more that there's just a feeling of this shifting in terms of almost like a pulling of the hips kind of towards each other. And that will help keep things in alignment in this pose for you. Seeing if you can find that softness, that opening in the left hip. Couple more breaths here.
And then hands come down to the ground, walking the hands back in, removing any props off to the side. Tucking the back toes to walk that foot in. Left knee comes back, and then either your circles or you're rocking side to side on your hips, or pressing through hands, lifting hips, downward facing dog. Lowering the knees down if you took downward facing dog. And then feet come out to the side, coming to sit down on your sit bones. So bringing the legs out in front, you can sit on a cushion if that feels good. Drawing the right knee into the chest, and then the right foot comes over the left. So you can either stay here, or if it feels comfortable, to pick up the foot from the floor and then stack the knees on top of one another so the foot comes to face backwards. So it's kind of like a half cow face leg is what we've got going on here. If that doesn't feel good on the knee, then stay with the foot by the side instead. Options from here, either to stay as you are, or you can begin to take a little fold forward. So, you know, if you've got the foot flat to the floor, you might just want to fold forward slightly, have a little hug around the leg. And if you're here, you can kind of interlace fingers on knee, or you can have hands down either side of the straight leg. And again, it may just be a really little forward fold. So sometimes these folds, they don't have to be massive, especially if you're just starting out yoga. Then, you know, please know that having to bring your head down to your knee in all these poses and fold up like a pretzel, it's not needed. You know, this is your practice for your body, and all of our bodies are very different. So feel free to just come to wherever your body is asking you to come. And that is enough right there. So as always, a sense of leading with the chest rather than with the forehead or the chin. And taking one more breath here. Inhaling, if you have moved forward at all, walking back with the hands, and then using your hands to gently lift that foot, bring it back to the floor, lifting it over to the other side, and then opening out the knee, bringing the sole of the right foot to the left thigh. And from here, turning your body to face that left leg if you can, so you might want to have a little shuffle around. Again, you can be sitting on a cushion if you'd like. And you're welcome to use cushions to support you in this pose. So you can either stay seated, holding on to either the knee or hands to the ground. Seeing if you can find broadness across the chest and getting a feeling of the chest moving forwards a little bit. And perhaps there is space to come forwards a little bit, and maybe there isn't. So you can really kind of gradually walk the hands forward, testing it out, seeing how the back of the legs feel, seeing how the hips feel, the lower back. Leading with the chest, no pressure to bring the head down to the knee. If this does feel really comfortable, you might want to come down onto elbows. You may want to hold onto the foot. And once you've got to a place where you feel that you've got as much length as feels comfortable, then you can allow the upper body to soften a little bit, then the head can soften a little bit. So you're kind of leading with the chest to the place that feels good, and then you can soften down. Couple of breaths here, being really mindful not to overstretch the back of the leg. Again, the head does not need to come down to the knee. So if you're sitting really very upright here, then that's absolutely fine. Inhaling, walking the hands back in if you did come forward,
Hands behind the body, and you can use that right hand if you want, just to help bring the knee in if that feels better. Straightening out the legs and shaking the legs. Maybe a little wave of the feet. So coming onto the other side, again, feel free to sit on a cushion if you'd like one. Drawing the left foot in. Left foot comes onto the outside of the right thigh, and then you can either stay here. So if you want to stay here when we give the forward fold option, then you can kind of wrap forward over the shin. Or if you'd like to, you can pick up that foot and stack the knees, bringing the foot backwards. So finding yourself into a comfy position wherever you are. And then interlacing either the fingers around the knee to kind of help bring the chest forward, help you sit up tall. Or maybe you bring hands to the ground and you'd like to take that little fold forward. So bearing in mind you have got your legs folded up here, it might not be as big a fold as you're expecting, that's fine. So that feeling of leading with the chest, coming down as far as it feels good. So just as you begin to feel opening in the leg or in the hip, in the lower back, as you feel that stretch beginning to come up, that's where you stay. And then if it feels good, you can close the eyes here, taking a couple more breaths in this place. If you have come forward at all, walking the hands back. And then really carefully using your hands to lift that knee, bring the foot to the floor first of all, and then bringing it over to the other side, opening out the knee, and the left foot comes against the right thigh. So a little shuffle again on the hips so that your body's facing towards that right leg. And then options here, staying sitting up tall. You can bring cushions in front of the body so you've got something to lean over, to fold forward over. And you can bring hands down to the floor and maybe beginning to slowly walk the hands forward, leading with the chest as before. And just as you reach the point where you feel that stretch, wherever it is, if it's really high up, that's fine. Then once you've reached that point, then the body can begin to soften and round and come forward. So there's often, one of the things that happens in yoga a lot, especially at the beginning, is that there's such a feeling of needing to be in these massively deep stretches, especially, if you're on Instagram and things like that, you see people in these, crazy pretzel poses all the time. And it's actually really easy to overstretch, particularly the back of the legs, the hips. So what this whole kind of point of coming in slowly is about is so that you begin to notice actually where's the point in your body where you get the benefit of the stretch, of the flexibility, the opening up, but without damaging and overstretching, which feels awful the next day and can be really quite painful. So really listening in, really coming slowly. You'll know as soon as you reach that point where you start to get a little bit of a stretch, that's your point right there. And it might be that for quite a few classes in a row, it feels like it's at the same point. Please don't be disheartened. If you've got a regular practice and you're checking in, then things will start to open up and start to loosen up. So taking a couple more breaths in this position, maybe your eyes are closed, maybe using your breath to breathe into any of those tight points. Knowing that it is okay wherever you are. And then inhaling, walking back with the hands if you have taken that forward fold. Hand comes underneath the knee to bring that leg back to center, hands beneath, beside and behind the body, shake with the legs, maybe a little kind of rock side to side, and then bending the knees, bringing the feet to the floor, taking that windscreen with the legs. From here, coming into Shavasana, our final resting pose. Awesome. So you can come down onto your back in Shavasana if that feels nice and cozy and comfortable. So scooting about halfway up your mat. Please feel free to use your cushions, your block, your blanket. You've got them there. So underneath the head, underneath the knees, those are really good places. And then once you get there, you can open out onto your back. You can bend the knees, whatever feels good. If you've got a different Shavasana position you prefer, on your side or seated, then go for it and take that. So I'm going to take mine seated today. So feel free to just get as cozy and as comfy as you possibly can. That's what this part of class is all about. Once you get there, allowing your eyes to close and allowing the hands to open up. So wherever they are, whether you're seated, lying, seeing if you can find openness through the hands and the feet to relax as well. Finding openness through the jaw, through the forehead, through the chest and the shoulders, all those places we've been opening today. Letting your hips become heavy. Letting the hips let go of anything that might be left in them. Anything that's tight, anything that's been holding on. The hips often hold on to lower back tension, so if you know your lower back can often get sore, maybe taking a little kind of squeeze through the hips, tightening everything up, and then as you exhale, letting them release. So that's a good little trick. If you know that you've got a tight place in your body, you can use it on the shoulders as well, so you can kind of tighten up the shoulders, and then exhale. It almost helps to sometimes tighten before we try and relax if you're not sure if you're letting go properly or not. So maybe taking a little moment to notice how your body feels now. Maybe there's a bit more space in the hips, the back of the legs, the shoulders, the chest. How does that feel to have done this movement, this gentle flow? Notice sort of what's going on in your body at the moment, how maybe it's feeling different. And then allowing your body to completely surrender. So maybe taking a deep breath in, filling the sides, the front, the back of the body. Exhaling through the mouth. And completely opening up, surrendering to the mat, letting yourself become heavy, almost as if you're kind of runny honey that's being poured and slowly melting out, spreading out across the mat. If you can, then staying here for at least another couple of minutes today. In this position, allowing your body to relax after practice and giving it time before the rest of the day. Thank you for joining me today. Namaste.